Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to resume. I'm going to introduce our moderator, Tom Ricks, who's an ASU fellow at Nowamagbe, known to many of you as the writer of many important books on the U.S. military, Fiasco, The Gamble, The Generals, just to name a few, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, and I'll hand it over now to Tom to introduce Senator McCain.
I can't think of a group that needs less of an introduction to someone than Senator McCain. You all know who he is. You know he's an American hero, and you know he's a fun guy to talk to. So, Senator McCain, welcome. It's a real honor to have you here. And we're kind of we've had the parade of the circus come through. Now you and I are going to clean up after the elephant.
There you go. You know, there's a story about that. The guy that did that all these years, and somebody said to him, "Why do you keep doing this? Why don't you go out and get another job?" He said, "What? And leave showbiz?" Anyway, that's the kind of way I feel being with you, because I should be questioning the expert rather than vice versa. I know nobody who understood the conflict in Iraq as well as Tom Ricks, and reported on it in depth and candor, and taught a lot of us a lot about it. So,
well,
thank you, Tom.
We're here at the end of a two-day conference on the future of war. There's been lots of talk about blurred lines between war and peace, about ambiguous situations, about no distinction being left between public and private, foreign and domestic. Is the U.S. military ready for this world?
Well, first let me say I'm not sure they're going to be ready for any conflict if sequestration continues. We had a hearing with all four of the uniformed service chiefs, all of them obviously at the top of their profession. And Senator Angus King of Maine asked them, said, if sequestration continues, will this put the lives of the men and women under your command in danger? All four of them said yes. My friends, I can sit here, and Tom and I could spend the rest of this time we have together and identify waste and mismanagement and ways to save money in the Pentagon. But with the meat acts of sequestration, that's not the way to do it. And we are really impacting in so many ways that are not really visible right now. And one of them, by the way, that disturbs me probably more than anything else is that some very highly qualified, high-quality men and women, both in senior non-commissioned officer ranks and mid-level officer ranks, are leaving. They're just tired of it. They're tired.
Are you talking to people who are leaving?
Oh, yeah.
And what are you hearing?
They tell me, we're tired of it. I don't know where I'm going next. We don't have the proper training. We can't operate. Pilots are flying 2 days a month to people down in Fort Bragg. They haven't had a real operational readiness exercise they can't remember. As you know, Tom, the first thing that happens when you cut the military is they cut the readiness, the operations and maintenance, those that are the easiest and yet have the most long-lasting effect. So, first of all, right now, if we keep up sequestration, I'm not sure we are going to be able to defend the country given the enormous increase in threats since sequestration was enacted. But let's say that sequestration is not. Let's say we're able to reverse it. I think we're going through a period of adjustment to the new kinds of conflicts, the ideologies, the sectarian aspects of the conflicts which you first saw back in 2001, 2002, 2003. And I think we need to have a far better understanding. What Henry Kissinger testified before the Armed Services Committee, and what we are seeing is the breakdown of the old world order. The nation state is now breaking down throughout the Middle East.
How do you make a military better prepared to adapt to that new world order or new world disorder?
You know, one thing that we have to understand is that when one group of people can inflict an attack on the United States as they did 9/11, and that changes everything the way we do business. Anybody who gets on an airliner knows that. Anybody who understands the need for security that has cost trillions to react to 9/11. And obviously their objective is to attack the United States, not to defeat the United States, but to attack the United States. So I think we have a lot of adjusting to do to this new form of warfare. We have some very bright people and in the military. Some of these young generals and colonels I've been incredibly impressed with, and they're sort of working through it at places like Fort Leavenworth and others. I'd just like to give you one example. After the attack, after we invaded Iraq, David Petraeus went back to Fort Leavenworth, as you know, and he spent 2 years with some of the brightest people he could find, and he came up with a strategy that worked, the surge. When we were losing, you chronicled that as well as any other observer that I know. But he had developed a strategy that did succeed. And
the U.S. military, the U.S. Army bitterly resented him for it.
they resented him for it.
He liked politicians, he talked to reporters, and he was successful in Iraq. In the Army, that was 3 strikes.
I'm not quite that cynical, but I do know that around him, he recruited a cadre of young people that looked up to him and admired him so much that he did leave behind in the United States Army a group of the Colonel McFarlands, the originator of the Anbar Awakening, and those people are still there.
I would bet you the majority have left the Army at this point.
I'm afraid you may be right.
Because I keep on noticing and from emails they're working for McKinsey now and so on.
I think you may be right. And one of the aspects of the military that you have seen and I have seen over my lifetime is there's really 2 ways up. One is the political path, and the other is the performance path. And quite often, the political path ends up in the positions of highest level, but. So, long answer to your question is we have a lot of adjusting to do. Okay. And we are in asymmetrical warfare, and we've got to understand that.
Sir Michael Howard, himself a veteran of Anzio landings, wrote that adjustment, being adaptive, is the key to future victories. How do you get a military that is more adaptive? We had General Odierno here this morning basically saying the U.S. Army, as far as he could tell, did everything right in Iraq because the problem was that the rest of the government didn't show up. That's a mighty unreflective position to take, I think, and not one that prepares the Army for adaptation.
Well, I think that, and you would agree, that he may have been referring to the fact that once George W. Bush had the courage to fire the Secretary of Defense, fire a whole lot of people who had us on a path to defeat, which you chronicled extremely well, and brought in Petraeus and this new group of young officers, that they did succeed. And my friends, they did succeed. I can show you the statistics of the reduction in attacks, the Russian, all of the indicators of success, but it required leaving a residual force, a stabilizing force behind. It required that. We didn't do it. Now we are paying an incredibly heavy price for it. Do they have to be more adaptive? Yes. And I'd say in one area that you and I have discussed in the past where we've got to be a lot more adaptive, and that's in acquisition.
I'm glad you brought that up because I want to ask you a question about that.
Could I just mention there are
Sure.
people out in Silicon Valley that I've talked to that I've said, hey, why don't you come and join us and get into the business and help us with this new information warfare challenge that we are facing, the internet, the propaganda, all that. And they said, we don't want to have to go through that labyrinth and that obstacle course that you call acquisition in order to get a government contract. What the hell? We make products and we put it out on the market and we make money. Why should we screw around with coming back to Washington and try and figure out how the Pentagon works? Now that's really alarming when you see the great advantage America has in the world is we have the most innovative people on earth. I was out, by the way, the other day at a place called Snapchat. Have you ever heard of Snapchat? Okay, There was not a person in that room over 25 years old, including the kid that was running it, which is only worth $4 billion or something like that. You know, it's staggering. And to think that that young man would want to come and do business in the Pentagon, I mean, that would be crazy. So we've got to fix the entire acquisition system, and we have failed miserably.
Do you see any quick fixes for it?
Well, one of the things we need to do, among other things, I don't want to get into the weeds, but we've got to make the service chiefs more responsible, put them into the acquisition process. We have to do that. You know, I was at a hearing a year ago or so. The chief of naval operations was one of the witnesses, and I said, look, the Gerald R. Ford was supposed to cost $10 billion. It now costs $12.4 billion. I said, do you know who's responsible? Do you know what his answer was? You know what his answer was. Yep. No. Somebody's got to start to be held responsible, for God's sake. What could my state of Arizona do with $2.4 billion? At Ash Carter's hearing, for confirmation hearing, I put up a list on the wall, not on the wall, a list at the hearing of $40 billion in programs that never got started, that never turned out a product. $40 billion. I mean, it's staggering when you think about it. And here I am fighting like hell to repeal sequestration, and then of course, this is thrown back at me, and I don't have as good an answer as I want to have. So if I would argue my priorities, repeal sequestration, but fix acquisition. Fix it. And it's bound to be able. Do you know that there's never been an audit of the Pentagon? Do you know that? There's never been an audit? Do you know that the Pentagon can't tell us how many people are in their employ?
Plus the contractors. Yesterday, Missy Cummings, who you may know, like yourself, a former Navy fighter pilot, and now a professor at Duke.
Far better than I was, yes.
And she knows a hell of a lot about drones. A very impressive talk. One of the things she said about drones is she's seen that the U.S. defense industry is not particularly interested because the profit margin is so small. They want to big expensive programs, not thousands of little drones. Is there anything you can do about that?
Well, first of all, I think there's going to be more money in it because we may have seen the last manned fighter aircraft in the F-35. We will have manned aircraft for logistics, for a whole lot of reasons, but I think we're going to see a technology that we use drones in. It's already been proven. When a plane can loiter for 12 hours, a drone can, and fire on a target, what do you need a pilot for?